Thank you for coming. First of all, Chanukah Sameach, Chodesh Tov. So, it's Rosh Chodesh, 2 days Rosh Chodesh. So, first of all, previous shiurim on this week's parasha, which should all be on TorahAnytime.com, are from 3 years ago. Lockdown. From 2 years ago, there was a shiur called Of Rage and Love. And last year, there was a shiur called The Pursuit of Everlasting Happiness. And now this year. Okay, so this is the culmination of the story of Yosef, the story of the build-up, the absolute climax of this whole incident, which started a few parashiyot ago. So Yosef finally reveals himself to his brothers. But before that, we have a confrontation between Yehuda and Yosef. Now, the parasha starts, the pasuk Yud Chet, in the first pasuk, it says, Vayigash elav Yehuda. And Yehuda approached Yosef, Vayomer, and he said, Bi Adonai, please, my Lord, Yedaber la'avdecha davar. Let me say something in Bo'oznei Adonai, in your ear. So now what happens here? This is like, it sounds like it's a very humble approach. It sounds like Yehuda is always coming on bent knees. This couldn't be further from the truth, because here, Yehuda now is being pushed into a corner. And one thing you do not do with one of the Shvatim, one of the tribes, is to push him in a corner. If you push him in a corner, you're going to feel the full wrath of the sons of Yaakov. So this is what happened. Now, Yosef is pushing and pressing. And he's taking their patience to the extreme. And he's saying, no, Yosef he wants to elicit the love between Yehuda and Binyamin, because now Yosef has been pressing to keep Binyamin, and Yehuda says, no, you can't keep Binyamin with you. So now Yehuda's got no choice. You put Yehuda in that scenario, and suddenly he changes. In the previous parasha, he was very humble and meek, and there didn't seem to be any anger, and now he seems to have lost it completely. So he's saying, now you better, because the Midrash really brings this to life. If you listen to the previous shiurim, as I mentioned on this week's parasha, you'll see I give an account of this whole incident from the Midrash, so I won't go into it now, but suffice to say that Yehuda was threatening Yosef now. Yehuda now completely changed. So what changed? And the answer is, says Rav Yosef Leib Bloch, he says Yehuda ultimately was responsible for his brother Binyamin, and he tried everything, but at the end of the day, Binyamin's responsibility lies with me alone, said Yehuda. So if you're going to threaten him, you're going to threaten me, and I will stand in front of my brother like a shield. In effect, that's what Yehuda was doing. So to get to Binyamin, he was telling Yosef. In fact, he didn't know it was Yosef. As far as he knew, this was Sophanat Paneach, the leader of the viceroy of Egypt. So he was saying, Your Majesty, you want to get to my brother Binyamin, you're going to have to go through me first. And you're going to get through me, you're going to see what's going to happen to you, and you're going to see what's happened to Egypt. It was a full-blown threat. So you can see here, when a person is given responsibility, and he takes the responsibility seriously, he will do anything to defend that responsibility. That's what happens. And I really believe that's how our youth, in our day and age, that's how we can get them to step up. Because a lot of the problems facing youth today are the fact that they don't have any responsibilities. They shirk their responsibilities, or they're not even given any responsibilities. If our youth today, who unfortunately so many of them are going off the derech and they're following bad ways, it's because they're not being given something to grab hold of. If you haven't got anything to grab hold of, you're floating in a sea, and there's no way you can rescue yourself. You're being drawn towards the tide. So our youth have to be given responsibilities that they themselves can take care of. That's why I'm very, very much in favor of Jewish youth groups like Ezra, who come and they take youth and they make them chock full with responsibility. They give them this to do and that to do, and suddenly you're becoming a bachanech, and you're becoming like a youth leader. And you see how people, these kids, they take the responsibility with both hands. And it really changes them. It changes them for the better. So what our children need today, they need to have something that they can do, that they can call their own, that they can take as their own project. And you have to cut the apron strings. You know, this is your baby now. You can deal with this, and let's see how you can come up with it. Instead of overloading them with stuff, and then they feel that they're not in control. They need to feel that they have a responsibility, and they will defend that responsibility to the hilt. The very important lesson comes in the first pasuk in this week's parasha. Okay, so as I mentioned, we've gone over this story already in previous shiurim. I want to go over to now Perek Memhei, which is 45, and we go straight to pasuk Gimel. So this is the shpitz. This is the point, the climax here, when Yosef says to his brothers, "I am Yosef." So we are told by Chazal, woe is to the generation in the times of the day of judgment, when we will all stand before Hashem, and Hashem will say to us, "I am Hashem," and then we'll all feel ashamed. Just like Yosef rebuked his brothers when he revealed himself, "I am Yosef," and the brothers were literally gobsmacked. They just couldn't. They were beside themselves. They were speechless because of this revelation. It came totally from left field. You have to understand, you could not make up a story like this of the shock, the sheer shock value that must have happened because of this revelation. It was just simply, you can't even express it in words. I mean, they themselves, literally had nothing to say. So this is the shock that the Jewish people will get on the day of judgment, when we are told, "I am Hashem," and when everything fits into place. And then when we look at our own lives and say, "Well, why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do that?" And now the truth is so apparent, and we were so far from the truth. But what I want to focus on is that we are told that when when Yosef says, "I am Yosef," this was a rebuke for the brothers. I want to ask a question: where's the rebuke? Where's the tochacha? Where's the reproach? It's just information. He's just saying, "Look, hey, I'm your brother. Pleased to meet you." What? Where's rebuke? How come suddenly now we think rebuke in terms of fire and brimstone and where were you when I needed you and you sold me? Nothing like that happens. No, it was just a revelation. Okay, it was a startling revelation, but from Yosef's point of view, he was just clarifying the situation. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz gives a very interesting idea about rebuke. What do we think of when we hear the word rebuke? We think, oh, it means being told off. Like when I was at school, when my teachers used to rebuke me and tell me, "Go stand in the corner," or "Go and write, I will not be naughty 100 times on a piece of paper and give it back to me by lunchtime." And or during lunchtime you have to do it, even worse, Chas v'chalila, a school child has to give up his lunchtime. Oh, that's Gehinnom for them, Recess, break time. You don't mess with the kids' break time. So the word rebuke connotes something very negative. It connotes like, you want to put your hands in front of your face and say, oh no, please stop. Or you want to put your hands over your ears. And you want to shut it out. That's not really the truth, says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. That's just our reaction, let's say. That's just a certain type of rebuke. But rebuke doesn't really mean that. Rebuke means when a person is made to realize the truth. And I'll tell you, Mashal, that none other than Rabbi Danny Kirsch told me quite a few years ago. By the way, this Wednesday, B'ezrat Hashem, I'm speaking in the JLE. I actually know in advance what the title of the shir is going to be. It's going to be called The Sugar-Coated Lie. Yeah? It's not about donuts. You'll see what it's about. If you turn up the JLE this Wednesday, B'ezrat Hashem, 9:15. So Rabbi Danny Kirsch, who happens to be the head of the JLE, told me the following mashal to explain rebuke. He said, imagine if a person is going on his way to see the king. He's a humble citizen and he's going on his way to meet his Majesty the King. And as he's walking into the palace, suddenly he gets a tug on his shoulder. And he turns around and it's one of the royal courtiers. And the courtier says to this citizen, he says, excuse me, sir, I hope you don't mind me interrupting you, but I thought I might draw your attention to something before you go in and seek your audience with the king. So the fellow says, well, what do you want from me? I'm going to see the king. You stopped me in the middle of it. What can be so important that you're telling me that I'm going in to see the king? He said, forgive me, sir, but I just wanted to tell you that you have a stain on your jacket just over there and you can't see it. So the fellow takes off the jacket and he says, Tucky, he's right. There's a big stain. Oh my gosh, I would have gone into the king with this thing. I would have felt like a right fool. So now, first of all, he starts rubbing it off and he looks at this fellow looks at the royal courtier and he says, how can I thank you? If you wouldn't have stopped me, I would have gone in. Who knows, the king might have been angry with me. Thank you so much. That's rebuke. It's being made aware of the truth. That's all rebuke is. It's being told, you know what? What you previously believed to be the truth is not the truth. Here, let me present you the correct version. That's all it is. It sometimes involves people getting angry, people getting cross. Okay, that's the negative side. That's only the outer coating. But soft called soft, at the end of the day, rebuke means setting somebody straight. That's all it is. It's all it is. So, bearing that in mind, says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, does it mean you have to shout when you rebuke somebody? Does it mean you have to get all fire and brimstone? No, you just say, excuse me, I'm sure you didn't realize it, but you've been saying the bracha of Sha'akol, but I actually think if you look, maybe it might be that bracha is Borei Pri Adama. Or maybe you might not know that, if you give your age as 18 when you're really 16 and you want to go and get a bank card, like a credit card, and it says you have to be over 18, and you're already 17 and you lie about your age, that's also called lying. Maybe you might not know. I'm sorry. It doesn't mean you have to shout and scream. It just means you believed something. I'll tell you what I think what the truth is. Simple as that. And it's perfectly exemplified by Yosef. He just said, before you thought I was an Egyptian ruler, and in fact, I played along with it. I made you think I was an Oved Avodah Zarah, that I was doing kishuf, I was doing sorcery, because I had this goblet, and I was telling you I could tell the future in the goblet. Well, you know what? I'm Yosef. That's all. That was all part of the plan. All that with the goblet. All the other stuff, that was all with a cheshbon, with a reason. But this is the truth. The person has to get with the truth. Now, further to that point, you want to see the reaction that the brothers had when they heard that statement, Ani Yosef. Because we mentioned that they were literally, they were gobsmacked. They were lost for words. They were lost in disbelief. And these were mighty, powerful brothers who lived their whole life, as far as they were concerned, embracing the truth. When they put Yosef through the Beis Din, and they made that Beis Din, they condemned Yosef to death, this was done with truth. This was done with honesty. This was done with a cheshbon. This was done in the correct way. So as far as they were concerned, they never did anything wrong. They did everything right. They attempted to embrace the truth in no uncertain measure. But now, despite that, they came to know what the right way was. So they were men of truth, but they crumbled in the face of the ultimate truth. They were shattered like a cheres hanishbar, like an earthenware vessel that falls to the ground, shatters in 1,000 pieces. That's the power of the truth. It can reduce the mightiest men to whimpering babies. And I'll give you another example. In a few months' time, Bezrat Hashem, we will all be in shul, we'll be listening to the parasha of Balak. It's in the summertime we're going to read that parasha. And there we'll learn about the villain whose name was Bilam. Now, we all know the story about the donkey, when he's going through on his way to curse the Jews, and then his donkey starts chatting with him from nowhere. And Bilam's reaction is, he starts chatting back. And there's a conversation which ensues. And things start getting a bit heated. And then suddenly the donkey says something very personal, up close and personal to Bilam. And the people who were with Bilam really, they felt disgusted with Bilam. And Bilam, the man of words, the mighty man who had the gift of the gab, who people used to pay money to him to curse other people or other nations. Suddenly this great man of words, this great orator, had nothing to say. You know why? Because the truth was revealed. The truth was revealed as to who Bilam was. He was nothing but a low-life, scum, the worst in the world. And when the truth came out, this mighty man of the nations had nothing to say. See, the unadulterated truth, there's nobody argues with that. And the same thing, it should be in the future, in the not too distant future, Bezrat Hashem, when Hashem will make himself apparent. Then all the people and all the nations who want to go around and say, we hate the Jews, and who want to go around and say, there is no God, and the people who put signs up and advertisements on buses and in the underground and in the subways saying there is no God, get with it, get on with your life, who needs God, there's no such thing. All those people will get it right between the eyes. And suddenly, they'll have nothing to say. And I welcome that day. And every well-meaning person has to welcome that day. Because enough with God being pushed down. Enough with Hashem's name being treated like nothing. Now we know Hashem is one. We know his name is one. But there's plenty of people who don't. There's a handful of Jews and a handful of righteous Gentiles. Nobody else. 99% of the world. Blissfully ignorant or militantly ignorant. So all those 99% of the world will be totally shattered. Or their opinions, their lifestyle will be shattered. Their lives will be meaningless. Because nothing can stand in the way of the truth. And I talk about truth with a big T. The truth with a big T is the knowledge of Hashem. So the sooner the world gets with it, the easier the transition is going to be. And I'll give you another example of how the truth is made to humble a person. And we'll need to look no further than our Chumash, than our Bible, that tells us about the Metzorah. Who is the Metzorah? The Metzorah is somebody who suffers from that spiritual disease called tzara'at, which is incorrectly translated as leprosy. It's not leprosy. Tzara'at translates as tzara'at. I'm sorry, there's no English equivalent. It's a disease that indicates a spiritual defect. Now, the popular reason for a person getting this disease, tzara'at, is because if a person tells lashon hara, evil speech, gossip, slander, motzi shem ra, downright lying. That's it, when a person would get this spiritual illness, and it would affect a person's house, and then if that went unchecked, it affects a person's clothing, and ultimately, if that also went by unnoticed without teshuvah, it goes on the person's body. Now, this doesn't happen now. We don't have a Beit HaMikdash, you don't have a Kohen, because the Kohen was the one we went to. You don't go to a doctor, you don't go to a Harley Street specialist. You go to the Kohen. And the Kohen will pronounce whether the person is tameh or tahor, is pure or not pure. So, what happens when a person sees he has tzara'at on his house? He has these discolorations on his house. You know what the first thing that happens? Because the house, the contents of the house, there's a risk that those contents will become tameh, will become impure, because anything which is within that structure, under the roof of that structure, becomes tameh. So what do? Straight away they go in and they take out all the house contents and they chuck it all in the street. Now, this is not just some arbitrary action. There's a reason for this as well, something that comes out that's frightening. Because there's another reason why a person would get this tzara'at illness. And that is if a person is what we call tsar ayin. The word tsar ayin literally means mean-spirited. If a person is the opposite of generous of spirit, we are supposed to be giving people. We are supposed to be generous people. Obviously within the correct measure. We don't give everything we have to drug addicts or people who gamble. But our tendency has to be that we want to give other people. We want to sacrifice what we have and give to those who have not. Now, if a person goes against that and he's mean and he doesn't give tzedakah and he withholds and he says, I don't have, why should I give you? I hardly have for myself. And then this person, because of his mean-spiritedness, he gets these discolorations in the house. Now what happens? His entire inventory in his house gets taken and thrown into the public thoroughfare. So now what happens? People see, they walk past, they see, oh, look at all this guy's stuff. The mean-spirited guy, look, he's got this and he's got that. He told everybody he didn't have. He was claiming, I can't give you. But now we see he's got so much. You see, that's the truth. He wanted to deny the truth. He wanted to say, look, I don't have enough for me even. But the truth is he had plenty for himself. He had enough for himself and he had enough for other people as well. And now the whole world can see it. That's the truth. A person cannot hide from that truth. So what comes out of this? Something very sobering and very frightening. A person has to be honest with himself. A person has to listen to his messages. You cannot deny the truth. You know the story that I quote from Rabbi Wallerstein, the honesty story. the story about the passport. I've said it a couple of times in previous shiurim. If you want to hear that story, write me an email, and Bli Neder, I will write back to you. rabbikelati@gmail.com. It's the passport story. It's a fantastic story. You cannot hide. You cannot make excuses for the truth. A person has to live a life of emet. Those excuses, when that day comes, when that judgment day comes, you cannot hide. They'll be transparent. They won't offer you any protection. Maybe now a person can hide behind excuses. People will believe him. And people will say, oh, you know what? You're right. I can see that it's difficult for you to pay your school fees. So we'll let you off. Meanwhile, this fellow's going on holiday to Israel, to France, to the USA, and his school fees are mounting up and up. And the poor teachers, they're not getting paid. And they don't know where their next penny is coming from. It's not the school's fault that they can't get paid, necessarily. What about the parents who need to chip in? Again, I'm not condemning anybody, chas v'chalila, chalila v'chas. I'm just talking, I'm throwing that out. Of course, it's very difficult to pay school fees. I know I speak from experience. It is very difficult. But to deny the school those school fees, and instead you go on an expensive family holiday, so go on. Nobody's saying don't go on a holiday. Go on a cheaper holiday. Go within the UK. Don't have to go to Israel for Pesach when it costs you £2,000-3,000. Stay Pesach home. Have a lovely, wonderful Pesach home. Put that money towards your school fees. Let the teachers get paid. You've got to be honest with yourself. It's simple as that. And I'll tell you another story. This is a true story about Rav Falk. Avram Falk. So the story is told that there was once a Talmid, a student of Rabbi Falk, who came out to him and he said, Rabbi, you know, I've got a lot of tainas against the yeshiva. I've got a lot of complaints and unanswered questions because I have certain issues. I'm only human. And I've been asking and I don't seem to find a response because I feel that, you know, I have to do this and that, and it's not necessarily in line with what the yeshiva wants from me. And I have a social life, and I have this life and that life, and the yeshiva has not given me answers. And I'm not convinced that I need to stop what I'm doing. And of course, what the student was doing was not in line with Yiddishkeit. I would rather not elaborate, because I don't know, but I'm sure we can imagine that he was not living the life of a yeshiva bacher. So Rav Falk said to him, I understand your concerns, and I wish to direct you to somebody who will solve all your problems, because there's a certain rabbi in Yerushalayim who is in possession of the absolute truth, and he can prove to you categorically that what you're doing is right, what you're doing is wrong, and what the Torah says is correct. But there's a price to pay for that type of knowledge. Because when you realize that knowledge, that what you're doing is a complete lie, and what Torah is enforcing you to do is the absolute truth, you will have to change your lifestyle. And it won't be a slow transition. It will have to be techef umiyad. It will have to be immediate with no delay. Are you willing to meet this rabbi in Yerushalayim? And of course the fellow, when he heard this, he realized that the rabbi was just saying this as a mashal, as an example. Because there's nobody who can say the complete truth. But what he realized is that if there was somebody like that who existed, who could tell him the truth, he would not be prepared to give up his lifestyle. So he wasn't a person who wanted answers. He wasn't prepared to have the answers. He himself had the answers. His answer was, I'm going to keep to my lifestyle until somebody proves me otherwise. And if somebody can prove me otherwise, I don't want to hear it. that fellow was hiding behind the excuses. And sometimes this can be very, very close to home. A person has to think very, very carefully. And a person has to listen to his messages. Because all of us, at some point or other, at some time or other, it could be frequently, it may not be so frequently, we all have messages from Shemayim that we have to listen to. And if we don't understand them, and we're not sure if they're messages from Shemayim, we need to discuss them with people who know, our rabbis, our more derech, somebody who can guide us in the correct way. But to ignore the message, even if it's a doubt, that is not wise. And we'll see if we stay in Perek Memhei 45, we go to Pasuk 27. So that is Chav Zayin. Vaydabru elav et kol divrei Yosef asher dvar aleihem vayar et hagalot asher shalach Yosef laset oto. This is talking about when Yosef realizes, well, Yosef did realize his father's alive, but now his father realizes that Yosef is alive. How is this done? Because Yosef sent wagons to his father, and the word wagon in Lashon HaKodesh is agalah, which is related to the word egel. Egel is a calf, as we know, because of the egel hazahav, the golden calf. What was Yosef hinting to his father when he sent him these wagons, which is related to calf? The answer is, the last time that Yosef saw his beloved father Yaakov, they were studying a certain portion. It was the portion of the Egla Arufa, the beheaded calf. What is the passage of the beheaded calf? It happens, very briefly I'll tell you, there's a halakha that if there is a dead body that is found in no man's land, and nobody knows how this person came to be there and how he came to die, then we measure from the point where the dead body is to the nearest town. And the nearest town has to take full responsibility for this fellow's death, because he wouldn't have died if they would have shown him hospitality. So now what happens if there are two towns near to this dead body and it's equidistant? So what happens? They take a calf and they do this thing called the Egla Arufa. They behead the cow. It's a whole thing. So it's without going into the whole thing, which I have done in a previous year. It was a sugya to do with a cow. So by sending the wagons, which is related to the word cow, Yosef was sending a hint to his father. You know that last passage that we were learning when I was a young boy of 17? All those years ago, I still remember it. And Yaakov got the hint. And why was this such a hint? Why did this change the face of how Yosef accepted that his son is still alive? The answer is in the fact that that's exactly what it was. It was a hint. It was a message. And when Yaakov got the message, Yaakov heard the message and he got the hint and he acted on the hint. And then, of course, we are told that his granddaughter came and played him a song. It was Serach, the daughter of Asher, came and played him a song saying Yosef is still alive. And that again lifted Yaakov's spirits, and he realized, my son is still alive. Maybe that's why I haven't got over this. I've had no closure. In 22 years, Yaakov had no closure. God forbid when somebody dies, Hashem gives a person closure. It's a gift from God. That no matter how beloved a person is, a person can have closure. Sometimes takes a bit longer, sometimes takes a bit less, but it's a gift from Hashem. But there was 22 years intervening. Yaakov had no closure. the, the loss of his son was still so acute to him, like it was yesterday. Now he realized I had no closure because he wasn't mourning anybody who died. His son was still alive. So now Yaakov got the hint. And again, this is another indication of how the wise person knows that nothing just happens. There's no random. There's no happenstance. Everything is besheret. You just have to have the knowledge and the foresight to read those messages. You want to read those messages? Become a person of truth. The more you become an ish emet, a person of truth, the more those messages will be blatantly obvious to you. They won't be clouded. They won't be fuzzy. They'll be like tuning into a radio station and hearing it directly in your brain. But the price you pay is you have to live a life of pure emet, of pure honesty. It's no easy task. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be done. I'll tell you a story about listening to your messages. This is a story of the Amudei Sheish. The Amudei Sheish was a great Rav, and it happened that he was at a brit milah. I believe he was supposed to be the sandak at the brit milah. And when he came to the brit milah, he asked to speak to the mother of the baby. And he took her to one side and he said, "Excuse me, everybody, we'll have to. There'll be a little bit of a delay. If you'll excuse me, I have to speak to the mother." He goes to speak to the mother for about half an hour, quietly somewhere. And then when the mother comes out of the room, she sees she's besides herself. She's crying. She's whatever. And the rabbi comes out, and the rabbi says, "I'm very sorry to all of the kahal who have come here today, but the Brit Milah will not be carrying on because unfortunately the child that we have here is a mamzer. The child is born from an illegitimate union. Actually, it happens that the halakha is that if there's a child who is illegitimate, then it has to be publicized. It's very sad, it's tragic, but it has to be publicized because there are rules when it comes to illegitimacy, because the mamzer cannot marry within Klal Yisrael, can only marry another mamzer, a female mamzer. So it has to be publicized. You can't just hush it up. It's very sad, and the whole story of mamzerut, it needs a lot of explanation. But one thing I should mention is people say, how can you taint a baby and call him a mamzer, illegitimate, and then you ruin his life from the outset? Poor baby, what's the baby done? One thing I'll tell you at this point, because there's a lot of questions on this. One thing that I will say, and that is, you have to understand, of course, we're not pointing the finger. Only Hashem knows what the baby had done to have this spiritual defect. But what we have to understand is, if a baby, God forbid, lo aleinu, shouldn't happen to any baby, was born with a physical illness, I don't want to mention any names, there's something that the baby will not survive. Do we turn around and say, how could you do this to the baby? And blame the parents and say this and that? What can you do? It's a genetic disorder, let's say. Tay-Sachs. That's one example. I'll just mention it. Lo aleinu, shouldn't happen to anybody. Tay-Sachs. Both parents are carriers. They were not diagnosed. And now the child becomes a fully blown Tay-Sachs carrier. And he's in for some very rough times. And I don't want to mention there's a mortality rate as well. Lo aleinu. So, do we say how cruel? How could you do? It's a disease. What can you do? That's what happened. Never on the baby, all right, but that's what happened. The same thing with the child is born, instead of a physical malady, it's a spiritual malady. You're right, you can turn around and say, well, the parents should have checked themselves. They should have gone for the Tay-Sachs test. And, before they're married. So one carrier should not marry another carrier. Because the children can come out, with being a carrier of this disease. Or another thing, what happens if a child has a birth defect because the mother is a smoker? And she was told, don't smoke during pregnancy. And she willfully ignores the advice of the doctors, and she smokes. And then what happens? God forbid, to the child. Now, I don't want to stir up any memories or anything bad and point any finger of blame. It's not my business, and I really don't want to do that. I don't want to. If I'm upsetting anybody by speaking about this, I apologize unreservedly. But I really want to bring out the point, and you'll forgive me. But you can't turn around and say how cruel, because that's what happened. That's we're not inflicting this on the child. This is a spiritual. This is what happens in terms of halakha. So just like it's tainted with mamzerut, with illegitimacy, so too a baby can be tainted with an illness or a condition. So that I will say. So now, going back to the story. So the Amud Sheish announced that this child is illegitimate, it cannot have the Brit Milah. Now, of course, people turn around and say, how did the Rebbe know this? He must have Ruach HaKodesh, he has to have divine inspiration, he got a message from God. The Amud Sheish replied and he said, no such thing. There's a very simple reason. He said, when I was learning Torah this morning, I happened to be learning, my learning schedule happened to be that I was learning about the laws of the illegitimate child, about unions between two people that are not mandated by the Torah. And what happens if a child is born out of wedlock. And I was learning these halachot, and then I heard about the Brit Milah. And then I thought to myself, you know what? I'm learning about children who come out of it, and then this Brit Milah today. I wonder, and he's thinking, and it's pounding in his head. And that's when he decided to gently broach the question with the mother, and of course, through subtle questioning and digging a little bit deeper, the truth came out. How did that happen? Because he listened to his messages. He got a message. Now, I'm not saying every time you open up the Gemara, there's your answer to life, the universe, and everything. But sometimes there's a nagging thing in your mind. You realize, you know what, I'm not doing this for nothing. And it comes to people who learn Torah. Prayer is how we speak to God. Learning Torah is how God speaks to us. So very often, you're learning something and you realize that is relevant to me right here, right now. That is a message. That's God talking to you. It's happened to me many times. Baruch Hashem, many times. I can think of a few incidents when I've been learning the Kavayashar, the Sefer Kavayashar. When I'm reading it, and the message, it's like Hashem is talking to me and telling me, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. It's phenomenal. But you have to tune in, you have to pay attention. Now, let's go forward, and I'm going to just finish with this point. Let's go forward to the next Perek. That's Perek 46. Let's see if I can get there. And we go to Pasuk 28. So it's Mem Vav, Pasuk Kaf Chet, Koach. ואת יהודה שלח לפניו אל יוסף, להורות לפניו גושנה. ויבוא ארצה גושן. So now, Yaakov realizes that his son is alive. He sends Yosef on a reconnaissance mission. You go and Yaakov sends his son Yehuda on a reconnaissance mission to go and prepare the land, to go and be like an emissary. So we are told in the Midrash that it wasn't that he went out to go and see, look, is it fertile land, and what's going to be, and like to become an ambassador. It wasn't so simple. It wasn't just that. His main mission was to set up a yeshiva. To go, set up, make sure it's a place, a Makom Torah, a place we can go and live a life of, like a yeshiva lifestyle, live a life of Torah. So for that he sent Yehuda, to prepare the ground, to do the groundwork. Because a place without Torah, that's not where we want to live. We want to live in a place where Torah is all around us. We soak in the atmosphere. So the question is asked, why was Yehuda selected for this? Could send Levi. Levi was the one who was a bastion of Torah. He stood up for the Torah. Send Yisachar, who was the Ben Torah. He was learning with Zevulun, had the partnership. So why you send Yehuda? Of course, there are many answers to this. I'm going to discuss two answers very briefly. One answer is, says Rav Henach Leibovitz, that Yehuda was the one who was unparalleled in his good relationship with Yosef. He was the one who had a solid relationship with his brother Yosef. More than any of the other brothers. Why is that so important? You know why? Because only an honest and straightforward derech eretz relationship and groundwork will be the foundation of Torah. You cannot base Torah as a foundation on something where there's no harmony, where there's no derech eretz, and as we mentioned several times just now, where there is no truth. There's no room for machloket. There's no room for enmity. There's no room for bad feeling when you're embarking on a mitzvah. The foundation must be solid, because if you have a foundation that's rocky, then nothing else will stand. And that's why we're told by our rabbis, you want to set up a yeshiva? Make sure the geld is kosher. Make sure the money that's to set up that yeshiva comes from kosher sources. It doesn't come from somebody who's stolen or who's embezzled or whatever he's done dishonestly. The money has to be kosher. There's so many beautiful stories about yeshivas. They were so careful. Even the people who were knocking in the nails, they made sure they were Yireh Shamayim, people who believed that they were fearing of heaven. Let alone the money that went into making the yeshiva. That for sure had to be kosher. Because you want to know that every element of this Torah institution comes through the right way. That's why Yaakov sent Yehuda, because Yehuda had an unparalleled, healthy relationship with his brother Yosef. The second reason I want to tell you is connected to what we've been speaking about previously. Because Yehuda was the one, if you remember, Yehuda was the one who, when he was accosted by Tamar and was told, Hakerna, when she was about to be led off to be burnt, she said, hang on a minute, I have a staff, I have this. Recognize, she said to Yehuda, recognize who these are. Whoever these belong to, that's who's the father of my child. Now, Yehuda could have turned around and hushed it up. He could have made Yehuda-gate scandal. Yeah, he could have said, no. I don't know what she's talking about. How dare she? He would have hushed it up. Listen, he was on the bed din. He was a dayan on the bed din. So for him to get involved in a scandal like that, for sure that should be covered up. Yehuda would never have done that. Because Yehuda was an ish emet. He was a chip off the old block. His father, Yaakov, was a man of truth, the ultimate man of truth, that he passed down to his son Yehuda. Because Yehuda didn't stand for any compromise on the truth or anything. He said, Tzadka bimeni. She is greater than me. She knows the truth is with her, and I submit to the truth. So important is that trait in Yehuda submission to the truth, standing up for what is correct, that Yaakov said, I want you to go and establish yeshiva. Because you are the one who stands up for the truth in the face of everything. And that's the basis for a yeshiva. That's the basis for an institution where we bring up our Jews in the ways of our holy Torah. That's the way our teachers behave. To be a teacher, to be somebody who passes on the tradition to the next generation, you have to be a person of truth. You have to be able to admit to mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Parents make mistakes. Teachers make mistakes. Rebbeim make mistakes. There's nothing wrong with making a mistake. What is wrong is denying the mistake, is covering up the mistake, is pushing it under the carpet. Because we're all human. We're not infallible. We're not robots. God did not create a race of robots to run the world. Name me one person in the Torah, one of our holy tzaddikim, who can say he was mistake-free. Not one of them. I challenge you, not one of them. Look how they dealt with the mistakes. That's how you see the galut, the greatness of our forefathers, of our holy tzaddikim in our Torah. To stand up for the truth and to concede, I made a mistake and this is what I'm going to do about it. And finally, I want to show you 2 points that I read to show you the unbelievable self-sacrifice of Yosef HaTzadik. We mentioned last week the beautiful chidush that we heard from Rav Yosef Freilich, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, which was told to me by his son Gershon. So I want to expand on that. Did you know that Yosef never went to visit his father while his father was in Egypt? For 17 years, Yaakov lived in Egypt. His son never visited him once. Now, if I tell you that fact, what would you think? You would think, what? 22 years. 22 years he wasn't with his father. And now his father comes into his land and he doesn't go and visit his father. What type of son is that? You missed your father or not? Listen to the self-sacrifice of Yosef. Do not take that piece of information at face value, because you need to understand something. That Yosef was very frightened that if he had a private audience with his father, that his father would say to him, hey, tell me the truth. What really happened with your brothers? What really happened with that coat, with the blood? Was that really the blood of an animal? Just tell me what happened. And Yosef, who, as we mentioned, was also a man of truth, would be forced to tell the story. Now you could say, okay, that's the truth. Yeah, the truth is the truth. But does the truth need to be told? Does the truth need to come out in the public? What would have happened if Yosef would have told the whole story, would have volunteered the truth to his father? You know what would have come out of that? His brothers would be embarrassed. He would have put his brothers on the line. And Yosef cared so much about his brothers that he was prepared to not see or not have a private audience with his father, just in case his father would bring up the subject. Can you imagine how much Yosef wanted to see his father more than anything in the world? To see his father one-on-one. Of course he must have seen his father during that time, but he never went out to see his father. He never sought a private audience with his father. He gave all that up so he wouldn't embarrass his brothers. See the unbelievable greatness of Yosef. It's beyond belief. And here's something else. That this also shows what an unbelievable person Yaakov was. Did you know Yaakov never kissed his son Yosef 17 years, he didn't kiss his son. You can imagine. Of course, there was the incident when they fell on each other's, they hugged each other. That's when they first saw each other. But Yaakov, again, he never kissed his son. Can you imagine how much Yaakov wanted to kiss his son? Just one kiss. I haven't seen him for 22 years. You know why he never kissed his son? Because again, Yaakov was scared. He was in fear that his son, for 22 years, you were in Egypt, in a land where licentiousness and debauchery and all the worst things, they're rampant. Of course, how could 22 years go by? You were a 17-year-old boy, a good-looking boy, one of the best-looking boys in the world. And all that going on there, surely you must have had a woman come in contact with you. A woman must have kissed you or touched you or hugged you or something. Even if you didn't want to do it, something must have happened. Surely, that's the reason. So Yaakov gave up on kissing his son because he was worried that maybe his son had been kissed by somebody, one of the non-Jewish women there, and he kept away from him. Now, the easiest thing in the world would be for Yosef to say, my father, Avi, Mori, my master, I'm telling you the truth. I resisted every temptation. And I had a lot of temptation. And it was thrown at me. I was thrown to the lions. I never once did anything outside of the realms of proper behavior. I never once suffered from impropriety. Not once did any woman kiss me or touch me. And his father, of course, would have believed him. But then again, Yosef didn't want to reveal the truth. He didn't want his father to have suspicions and to know and to think untoward, and then the truth would come out, and then Yaakov would be distressed and he would hear the whole story. So Yosef kept the truth to himself. And he never told his father. And he was mavater on that contact with his father, because he didn't want, again, to shame the brothers, to know that the whole story will come out, and then the story with Potiphar, and then suddenly the finger will be pointed, and the brothers will be shamed. Yosef kept it to himself. He sacrificed two things. He sacrificed a private audience with his father, and he sacrificed the kiss of his father, because he didn't want to shame other people. So who are we to shame somebody else in private, let alone in public? In public, it's unspeakable. We know what happens when, God forbid, you embarrass somebody in public. Ein lo chelik lo olam haba. A person does not have a share in the world to come. He could be learning Torah day and night. He could be a Hatzolah driver. He could be the greatest machanech, the greatest teacher in the world. If he turns around and embarrasses somebody in public, he doesn't have a share in all of that. And we know that the Chilul Hashem, desecration of God's name, is not wiped out in this world. You cannot wipe it clean. You can do teshuvah, correct? But there's a process. You have to do complete teshuvah. You have to have Yom Kippur. And your forgiveness is sealed only with a person's death. Only when a person dies, that's when he achieves forgiveness for the sin of Chilul Hashem. Chilul Hashem is something we have to fight in this world. We have to run miles away from that Aveira of desecrating God's name, because it's absolutely antithetical. It's the opposite of what we stand for in this world. Not only are we not doing what we should be doing, but we're actually doing worse than not doing what we're doing. We're doing what we shouldn't be doing. So we're guilty of two things: not doing what we should be doing, and doing what we should not be doing. Not sanctifying God's name, but worst of the worst, we are making God's name unsanctified. Chalila v'chas, God forbid, nobody should do such a thing. So that's one thing we need to come out from. We need to, first of all, we need to become people of truth. We need to ensconce the truth. We need to push the truth forward. We need to run away from lies. All the little things that we think, it's not so bad. If I don't own up about the parking ticket, it doesn't make a difference. So what? They'll never find out about it. We need to run away from they'll never find out about it. That excuse, they'll never find out about it. Okay, maybe they might not find out about it, but Hashem has found out about it. And that's not good. If you want to leave that unchecked, that's not good. So Yiratzor, all of us will live our lives with the truth. And then we will get clear messages from Shemayim without any interference or any static. And we'll hear those messages until we'll hear the ultimate message. And that is that Mashiach is here. Mashiach is loud and proud. And come, we will all go to the Beit HaMikdash all together. Na'aleh LeBeit HaMikdash, LeBin and Ariel, may it happen without any pain and without any further delay. V'chein yosov v'nomar amen. Chazak u'baruch, Chanukah Sameach, and Chodesh Tov. See you next week, B'ezrat Hashem.